your answers, Ahmed, Julie, and Allison, for that question. Before we move on, would y'all mind if I start recording the meeting? Okay, that's perfect. Thank you. Um, so next question. I know that y'all did talk about how diversity did influence your work performance. So instead of, like asking that question, I was wondering if y'all can give an example of how your work performance improved whenever you felt included. That may be a tough one. That may be a tough one.
I guess I can kick it off. And so I've worked in several different plants in Dow, and I've worked in newer plants, and I've worked in older plants. As you can guess, since I've worked for Dow for 23 years, it's been quite a long time, and things have changed along the way. And I can think back to my first production engineer role. The plant that I went into was a very old plant. It had been built in the 1950s, I think. It was still operating, and it was run by a bunch of old white men, pretty much so. There was not a whole lot of diversity going on in that plant. And so I was this young female engineer that came into the plant, and it was kind of funny. They didn't even have a proper women's locker room when I first got there because they'd never had any women operators that worked there back in the 1950s when it was built. But despite what looked like it could be a really awkward situation, it was surprisingly not, because these men that I was working with, they enjoyed, teaching me how to be an engineer. They were happy to take me out in the process with them and show me what they were doing and explain what they were doing. I don't know if at the time I was, non-threatening to them or what it was, but it was a really great environment, and I learned so much because we just had this wonderful collaborative relationship. And I mean, honestly, even 23 years later, I still think fondly on that. And I still have friends that I talk to from that very first job that I had in Dow, because it was just such a nice family environment and they invited me in. So that's sort of my story of what it's like to feel included. I felt like I was part of the team, and it didn't matter that I, had a different background, and I had moved to this plant. It wasn't in Texas. I had moved from Texas to this plant, and it was just inclusion, and it was really great.
Thank you for sharing your experience, Julie.
I'm happy to speak next on it. I'm trying to think about how to make this relatable for, a college student. To me, first off, how I would answer this is 100% my work performance is definitely influenced when I feel included. And I mean, imagine, when you're a college student and say you're in a group project with 3 other people. So what's the difference like, when you go to meet up with your group and the 3 of them are like best friends and they're barely talking to you and you're all doing your tasks, how motivated do you feel to like go in the conversation, like, hey guys, like what if we did it about this way and that way, and like getting your mind more stimulated, how engaged do you truly feel in that group project versus, if they're not really talking to you, they're having their own inside jokes, they're barely looking at you, and you're just, you're just going to do your bare minimum of the deliverables that you were asked for your project, right? There's not really anything stimulating you or getting you engaged to think outside the box and, and truly collaborate. So to me, it's the same way I've felt when I've been in my work groups, and I felt truly included. If I go to a conference room for a meeting over a project or some troubleshooting an issue, and when I felt included by the work team, they ask me, hey, Evan, how are you doing? And they're joking around with me. They're asking me my thoughts. I am so much more engaged and feel comfortable to let my brain just wander and do what it needs to do, rather than just sitting there and kind of feeling like, okay, waiting for the clock to tick down and, thinking about what I'm going to do what else in my day. And I mean, that part of it too is also when I felt comfortable to be my true self, share about like my sexuality and whatnot, and still feel comfortable and welcomed by my group. That took it like to a whole other tier where I just really felt like they appreciated my differences and my background, and I still felt welcomed, and I was able to just be free to, I had the motivation to contribute to the organization versus if you're just there to show up and make money and you don't feel engaged, you're going to do like more likely you'll do the bare minimum in my perspective.
Well, thank you, Evan, for that. Allison, Ahmed.
I can give an example maybe of when I felt pretty excluded at work. It kind of fits into what Evan was just talking about. Is it's not a school project, but the first plant that I worked at felt very included there, had a great time. Everyone treated me just like Julie was talking about, wanted to teach me. I really wanted to learn everything. The next plant that I worked at, though, there was like 2 shifts. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but the operators usually work on these like rotating shifts. So there was 2 shifts, so like 8 people that I just could not get on my side. They would make comments about how like women never find things, they never like to go out in the field, and I wanted to be out there. I wanted to learn everything. I always have had like a excitement about things mechanical and how things work, and so I would go out there with them and they treat me just like this delicate little flower that I didn't know what I was doing. And at some point I just wouldn't go in the control room when they were working. And it was my job to talk to them and to tell them we were having quality problems, and I just like couldn't, because it was just nonstop of them just making me feel like crap, like I was the worst engineer ever. And then the other 2 shifts loved me, like loved working with them. They always were teaching me things. They would let me sit in the control room, just talk to them, just like make jokes and learn. And the other shifts just didn't. So I just stopped engaging and ended up making me not want to work in a plant because of that. And I ended up moving into an R&D role and got an opportunity to work at a pilot plant. And I was honestly terrified to go into a plant again because of that experience. And that pilot plant, that group there was just amazing. Everyone just respected everyone's backgrounds, and they respected mine because I came from a plant that and this was a brand new pilot plant. And so they were still learning and trying to get reliability programs and safety programs in place. And they really valued my background. So yeah, so it can really affect you if people are not treating you like you want to be treated and treating you like you're worthless, basically. So just wanted to share that little bit of contrast from what was being shared.
Well, thank you for that response. I'm so sorry to hear that they treated you like that.
It's quite interesting that I guess almost everyone's example is around when they just started working, and I had a very similar experience, and I think it's just normal. Once you start working, you're the newest guy. You're still trying to learn the environment. You're still trying to learn how things work. So you're not 100% comfortable. I'll be honest. And when I started my first role as a run plant engineer for this plant, they were literally in the middle of a turnaround, and they were trying to solve a very complex issue with a clarifier that kept experiencing imbalance, right? So, and we had this meeting where everybody kept talking. They kept trying to resolve the issue, and at the end of the meeting, one of the leaders asked for like a roundtable, right? Because I had not said anything the whole time. I barely knew where I was at that time, and I was very new. And she asked for a roundtable just to, ask if everybody has any other ideas or anything. And we went through the room until it finally got to me, and I said something completely out of the box that nobody in the room had even thought about. And that happened to be what eventually led to the solution of the issue that we were dealing with. And it was very, very interesting. And she literally came to thank me after, for trying to speak up. But I guess the point that I'm trying to paint is without that person making me feel inclusive and asking me, if I had any other ideas or suggestions, we probably would have spent more time, more hours trying to resolve that issue. and it does work, right? So I think that's really what I wanted to share with everybody.
Well, thank you, Med, for sharing. Thank you. And great answers from everyone for the third question. I'm really grateful that y'all were able to share your experiences with us. So our next question is, what can be done to further your knowledge and also your understanding of diversity and inclusion?
So do you mean just for like the audience or myself?
Well, just for like everyone in general, how can you, increase your like your knowledge and understanding for it?
I think it's listening to other people's stories and actively trying to find people that are different from you, that grew up in a different country or a different region, or have maybe even just have a different degree than you. You can just learn so much about people just by listening to them and then doing your own research. If you're interested in anything, Google it first. There's a lot of people, well, some things could be rude, but just some people are just tired of, trying to teach people. And so if you can just spend some time, if you're really interested and want to learn more about something, like, for example, the LGBTQ community, you want to know what those letters even mean, a Google search is really easy and it doesn't judge you. So that's, to me, the easiest way. There's so many really great YouTube videos too. But yeah, listening and researching is the best step forward.
Yeah, I agree with Allie, but I would also add the caution, just make sure you don't get all of your information from social media, because as hopefully you've observed through your own interactions in social media, right? It just becomes a sounding board of all of your friends are probably people that have similar opinions as you. So, you get those same opinions rebounded back at you all the time. And like Allie describes, if you're not sure if that comment is really true, you're not sure if that stereotype is accurate, do a little bit of independent research, outside of the social media community. Do a Google search, watch a YouTube video, educate yourself a little bit, and then it's totally okay to ask those questions, right? We have to. We've become a society that is so easily offended by everything, but sometimes we have to just have a little bit of grace and a little bit of patience. And when somebody's genuinely trying to understand, right? Can you tell me more about, your lifestyle or your background, or, why is your hair the way it is, or what's it like to be a woman in a man's profession? Any of those questions, just, if somebody's asking you genuinely, have a little bit of grace and patience and be willing to talk about it. Start the conversation. That's how we all learn.
Yeah, I would say, following up on Julie's point, to me, the work is never done. So I think as long as you keep your mind still open as you're understanding different groups and your effort to embrace and understand diversity, you may have a picture of, say, Latin America in your mind, or even a specific country in Latin America. You may do your own research. You may see what's on social media about current events there. You may speak to one person from Mexico, but as long as you don't say like, okay, I got it, like that's the experience of people from Mexico. No, you want to then be open to meeting another person from Mexico, and they may have a completely different perspective and experience and culture, all these different aspects. And so to me, the work is never done. So always being open to, as Allie said, listen, be curious, be genuinely curious, don't just ask and then not really listen, but truly listen to someone's story, because people love to talk about themselves. I find it fascinating, so I always love hearing about other people's experiences, but I'm from a very small town in Texas, which was really boring. So I'm like, tell me more. So to me, that's the easiest way to just truly hear different backgrounds, but also place yourself in spaces where you are the minority. So it's really easy in our company because we have different employee resource groups. And there's one we have our global African affinity group, our women's group, LGBTQ group, etc. And I joined all of them, and I would go to their events. I would want to hear their topics. And I was the minority in like pretty much all of those. And I loved it because I was truly able to see, you know, different perspectives for my own. And I'm sure in your city or town or whichever, there are certain affinity organizations that hold events, whichever, if you want to go salsa dancing, if you want to go learn how to cook a specific cuisine, whatever, you know, put yourself in those places and try to, you know, embrace that empathy of the different groups, I would say.
So one of the things is very common amongst what everyone said is that you have to be very intentional about it. If you're trying to understand diversity and inclusion, it's not, you won't just sit down and stay in your own comfort zone and understand it, because some of it is you know, it's very deep, and sometimes it's uncomfortable to talk about, especially when it comes to racism. But things like that, you have to kind of put yourself in an uncomfortable situation. For example, in my organization, when we have somebody new come in, you know, take them to lunch, talk to them, trying to understand where they're coming from and what they've done in the past, and just make them feel comfortable. That little piece can, you know, determine the success of that person in the organization and how welcoming it will be for that person. So it does take a little bit of work. You won't get it by just sitting down. Like Julie said, also, you could do research, do Google research. There are a lot of books out there that talks about things like this, but then you have to be careful to filter out the noise and make sure that you truly understand, you know, what you're reading. And like I said, you just have to be very intentional about it.
Well, thank you, Ahmed, Evan, Allison, and Julie for those responses.
Can I add one more comment? I just wanted to like do a final comment of like, don't be afraid to make mistakes. I think that's the biggest thing of learning is when you make a mistake and someone corrects you, you can, you know, respond appropriately saying like, oh, I'm so sorry. Help me be better. Help me learn so I can understand why I should not say that or whatever it is. And like Evan was saying, like putting yourself in these uncomfortable positions of being the minority, you could like making yourself uncomfortable, making the mistakes is a good way to learn. So just wanted to end with that.
And that's a great point, Allison. So thank you for that. So I think we may just do one more prepared question, move on to the audience questions. But I think we'll go with number 6, if that's cool with y'all. And it's, how could you help a colleague increase the value they place on workplace inclusion or inclusion in general? I know that especially in Southeast Texas, there are some people who are not as open. So, you know, this question is a very important for a lot of people in the audience.
So that's a hard one, because that's literally, I'm like looking at Allie, I'm like, that's what we've been trying to do forever. And there are so many different ways you can go about it. I'm interested to hear everyone else's answers. I think, to me, what can be the most effective way is the storytelling aspect. You know, there's so commonly like statistics thrown around or data, whatever. But say, you know, you have someone who doesn't get inclusion, like, why are we doing it? Maybe they've always been the majority. Maybe they've never been excluded. They truly can't put themselves in the position to understand why inclusion matters because they've never been excluded. And always being the majority and always being included, of course, you're not going to understand the need for inclusion. It's your normal way of life. And I think our most successful events that we've had to attract newcomers and get them engaged into our employee resource groups and the inclusion effort is bringing someone in, and just like how Julie and Allie shared their stories, you know, that puts you in their shoes and helps take people out of their position. And just for a moment, you know, whether it's 30 minutes, an hour, whatever, try to imagine what it's like for others. Because sometimes these people have never talked to these other folks who have been excluded before. So when you have that storytelling aspect, and again, it's just told as a, hey, this was my experience and this was the effect it had on me, and it's shared more as a learning and not as like a chastising of like, oh, bad white people, you did this to me, then those people can feel, I guess, comfortable trying to practice empathy. And sometimes at the end of the day, it is kind of like teaching empathy, but it's not a bad thing. It's just really an exposure thing. And that's where I've seen, you know, anytime there's an event, I'm like, we need a speaker. We need a speaker who's gone through that. You know, they speak to their experience, and that's, to me, always been the most successful.
Yep, I agree. That's the biggest thing we're trying to do is more one-on-one conversations and more storytelling so that people can really hear and feel. Because I think that's where we're going to get people on board is the emotional side of it. Because yeah, you can go up there and say all these statistics, but that's probably not going to change most people's minds. One example that I did hear that Evan was kind of mentioning was trying to put people into others' shoes was that we have a disability network, and they had an event where they tried to let people kind of sit in a wheelchair for the day and try to do their normal work. And they actually ended up having started the event in high top tables so that people that came in that actually were in wheelchairs couldn't even sit at the table. So it was things that they didn't even think about because they never have thought, okay, you know, about the table or the setup. So it's just things like that that just help you learn by being in that actual situation, because you could have sat all day and planned it and never even have thought about that. So.
And thank you for those answers. Those are really good points. Julie and Ahmed, do you have anything to say about this question?
I just build on it and say, you know, storytelling is a fantastic way to just kind of get into the head, into the lives of somebody that's different than you. But also, you know, how can you specifically help somebody? Maybe you can invite them to something. All those great examples Evan gave earlier, right? Maybe you like salsa dancing. Ask your friend to come along. Maybe you, you know, maybe you like to cook food from a different culture than the one that's predominant in your area. You know, cook a meal for a friend from that culture, and just, you know, ease, especially if somebody's feeling a little bit resistant or is a little bit uncertain, doesn't want to be in that uncomfortable situation, find a way to make it a little bit more comfortable for them and just kind of get that ball rolling, right? Something simple, something fun where they can see, gosh, you know, things that are different than what I'm used to could still be really interesting and really fun. And maybe I want to try a little bit more and stretch myself a little bit farther next time.
Well, thank you for your comments on that.
Yeah, so I completely agree with what everybody has said, and you know, it's really about sharing success stories of things like this and how it is done good in the past from you being inclusive, right? So a lot of people, the concept is so unique and new to where, you know, the old school people, some of them don't understand it, and the only way to go about it is helping them realize how it could even make their life easier if they're being inclusive, right? You know, let's say you work in a department where, you know, like I said, somebody new comes in, and you know, the very first day nobody introduced themselves to that person. You know, it's very easy for that person to continue to be in that same box, right? But if you try the other way, where, you know, you welcome someone and the very first day they come into an organization, you can easily see how it will make that person feel a little more comfortable, to where from then on they will be the one coming to you and talking to you and trying to learn from you. So I think, you know, helping people realize how it's going to even make their life easier, you know, goes a very long way.
Thank you, Ahmed. And thank you all for, you know, answering this question. You know, definitely we did learn a lot from all your answers, from all these prepared questions, and we'll definitely apply it to our daily lives here in Southeast Texas. So thank you. And now I think we'll just open up the floor to everyone. I'll just stop sharing my screen so I can see who's raising their hands. But we can just open up the floor to anyone who has questions that they'd like to ask these panelists. Oh, Anthony Galvin has a question. So Yeah, Anthony, you can just unmute yourself and just ask your question.
Yes, hello. What would you say is the most fulfilling part of your job?
So that's a great question, and I bet we all have different answers. And probably if you ask me today or you ask me next week, I might give you a different answer too. But um, I've had a lot of different roles over my years at Dow, but the thing that I enjoy most is honestly the connections with the people. So, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I was actually pretty excited when Kelvin asked if, if I would participate in this. I love to connect with people. I love to hear their stories. When I was a plant leader and I had lots of people that worked for me, I made it a point every day to go out and just walk around and ask them how they were doing. And I mean, I knew everybody's name, and I knew who had kids that played soccer and who had a wife. And I mean, I made it a point to know things about people. And so that's strangely, being a chemical engineer, working in a big chemical company, you might think I would give you some like huge technical project I've worked on. But the thing that I love best about Dow, and the reason why I've stayed there for 23 years, is because I just honestly love the people and the culture and all the connections and opportunities to learn about everybody and where they've been and what they're doing.
Does anyone else have any questions for the panelists? Oh, let's see. So we actually got one comment, and it is from Zed Mohammed, and he asked, "Were there any experiences you had when you were in college, or perhaps younger, that made you prioritize diversity and inclusion?"
I mean, I can try to speak to it since for me, college was not too far ago. So I went to, I think, my entire college experience, honestly, because, so background on me, I was raised in a small little town in Texas, an hour south of Houston, and it was majority white. Honestly, it was like, I think literally the statistics are like 60, 70% white, and then maybe like 20, 30% Hispanic, but predominantly people from Mexico. Like not even like other parts of Latin America. It's like that was it. So growing up, that was like my exposure to people. And when I went to the University of Houston, which some people can fight me on this, I think is like the most diverse university in the country, if not one of the most diverse. It made me, just appreciate and have this fascination of all the different people from across the world. And like just kind of like how Julie was saying, I found like fulfillment and enjoyment and just all the good feelings of talking to people and truly hearing their experiences and stories. And so I knew, from that point on, I felt so spoiled by my experiences at the University of Houston. I knew in some way or form I wanted to continue that into my career. And yeah, so it was great finding a company that was able to offer that. But I think just being such a different space and being exposed to so many different things is what truly got me excited.
I can also talk on that. So I in 7th grade, I used to live in Amarillo, Texas, actually Bushland, so 100 people. And my dad got transferred to Miami, Florida. And I went to a high school that was predominantly Hispanic, of all different Hispanic cultures. And so I was the minority there. I was probably one of maybe 10 in the school or my graduating class of like 300 that was white and female. So I got just exposed to so many different people. And at some point, at least I didn't really see myself as really different from them. I just wanted to like learn so much. I learned how to dance salsa. I was trying to learn Spanish. I just loved it. And actually, when I went to Georgia Tech, I was missing that because it's a predominantly white school in Georgia. So that's when I noticed, man, there's I miss my friends. I miss that variety of people from different backgrounds, and so coming into Dow, I saw that diversity, and I always, if you see pictures of me, I'm always around people that are all different backgrounds. Everyone looks different than me. I love learning about people, and yeah, so I guess that's what fed it, was being put in that position where I was not the majority anymore.
I can also add to that. I'll share one of my college experiences with you. So I had a friend in college, a Middle Eastern guy. His name doesn't even look American and not even close. And it was literally the smartest guy in my class, right? And this guy had a very good resume, but like I said, his name was very different. And for a very long time, um, this guy never had an opportunity to even get an internship. And so at some point, he decided to try a test and just make his name look American in some kind of fashion. And this same person, same resume, same experiences with a different name, started getting a lot of calls. But obviously, he couldn't move on because this was just a test, right? So that really opened my eye, and it just made me realize how much a lot of companies were missing out on this very talented individual just because his name really looked different, and that just made me appreciate more and show me the opportunity and the gaps where we have in the country as a whole from a diversity and inclusion standpoint.
Yeah, I can add something too. I grew up in Austin, Texas, which obviously is, a bigger, diverse and interesting city, but I had sort of an interesting experience growing up. I grew up with just my dad. So it was just me, a young girl growing up with my dad. My dad was older when I was born. So my dad was born way back in 1940. All of his friends were all born around that time as well. He's a scientist. All of his friends were scientists and engineers. And so, instead of it takes a village, I kind of feel like I was raised by a chemistry lab. So I had all of these, older white men who were surrounded me all the time. But the craziest thing was, even though they were from that, 1940s era, every single one of them said, you can be anything you want to be. And they all encouraged me to go to school. They encouraged me, when I wanted to go tinker with the stuff in their lab and I wanted to take things apart, they would take the time to explain it to me. I remember when I took like my physics classes in college, I was able to call all these guys and say, hey, can you explain electrical engineering to me? Because I don't understand it. And so these guys would explain it to me. And, it was just this feeling of, that was the being asked to dance, right? It was being told that nothing should hold me back. And even though I didn't look like them or look like sort of that picture of what a scientist should be, I could still do it. And as a result of that, that's made me really super passionate about STEM for young students, especially young girls. That's why I do a lot with the Girl Scouts, because I just want young girls to hear that same message that I heard, that you can be anything you want to be. So that's one of the things that just made it really important for me and why I've stayed, really passionate in that space.
I just want to add a follow-up because I love Ahmed's and Julie's answer, and it made me think, Ali and I both shared, we love learning about other people and hearing their stories. And I know Ali's the same way as me on this. Part of that learning about the stories, though, is also hearing the disparities and some of the issues and the obstacles that different people from different backgrounds have to go through that maybe you didn't have to go through. So hearing those stories and putting yourself in their shoes, that lit a fire in me, and that's probably what truly got me driven for inclusion and diversity. That was like, this isn't right. I want to be the change from an organization to make it more inclusive and make it more equitable for others. So yeah, we focus on like, oh, it's great learning about the stories, but I do want to emphasize, and I know Ali's in the same boat because she literally got me into it, that you learn about those stories, but then that makes you excited to be as strong of an ally as you can be.
That sounds great. Those are all amazing answers. I think we can squeeze in one more question, if that's fine with y'all. And I saw that Jacqueline Salmeron was raising her hand. in the chat. So if you can unmute yourself, Jacqueline, and ask your question, that would be awesome.
Hello. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, you're perfect. Yes.
Thank you. I'm not sure how to put this question into proper words, or if it would make sense, but when you all started in the industry, what stopped you from being intimidated if you were the minority in the group?
I don't mind starting. So even though I am a white male, which is majority, I am queer, bisexual, and I felt in my head already like excluded by that. I was already excluding myself and felt very intimidated, especially, you look at the chemical industry and the typical face of the chemical industry. I was terrified to share, what I was doing on the weekends with my queer group of friends or with my partner at the time. And so what got me out of that headspace and to finally feel, overcome that intimidation, I was going about the wrong way. First, I was literally like sitting down with everyone in my department and a chance to get to know them. But really, I was like feeling them out and probing them to see how safe I could be to be my authentic self around them, because I was that much of a control freak. But really, it was, it wasn't total loss, because in doing that, I met actually Allie, and found someone who pretty much reassured me that I could be my full authentic self in this environment. Finding someone safe that you can talk to and share your concerns, and they can help dispel them out of your head, or maybe even, if some of those concerns are valid, they can at least help you navigate through them and put you in a position for success to overcome them. So to me, really finding the people to put in your corner, at least in my experience, is what helped me, because once I knew, I met Allie and she was in my corner, I was able, kind of got to a point, I was like, you know what? I feel comfortable enough. I've got enough people that I can just be my authentic self, my organization, and speak my mind and not hide anything about myself. I may not win everyone over. Everyone may not like me or approve of me, but it doesn't matter, because I feel like I have enough support and recognition from the people that do matter. So that's what really helped me.
So I think that support system is just it's got to be there, right? And I mean, hopefully you are a self-confident person, but not everybody is, right? Not everybody just has that, oozing self-confidence. And when you don't have that, make sure you have that support system, whether it's, like Evan described, he found Allie at work and she told him that, yeah, it's okay. You can be your authentic self and we're going to accept you, and we're happy to have you here. But if you don't find that person right away at work, make sure you find that person, whether it's, a family member. For me, it was like my dad saying, you can do anything, you can be anything. Don't let those people intimidate you. Or maybe it's your best friend, or maybe it's your partner. But, having that person, that support system to just, be the cheerleader for you and say, it's okay, you're going to do this, you're going to be successful, really helps, especially when you're going into a new situation, like a new career, I think.
Well, thank you for all those answers to the questions. We're about to run out of time, but I just want to thank all of you, Julie, Allison, Evan, Ahmed, for coming out tonight. I know this is outside of your work hours, so we're really grateful that you did spend some time for the Lamar University student body. And also, I want to thank Sui and Azmi for helping out with SACE on this event as well. But yeah, again, we're really grateful for everything you did give to us. All the information will be something applicable that we'll be taking back to today.
I just say, Kelvin, if anybody's got questions that maybe they didn't want to ask, during the session, or if they think of something later, or they have a question about what it's like to work for Dow or in this industry or whatever, I think we're probably all on LinkedIn, and you can absolutely connect with us, or Kelvin knows how to get in touch with us through our Dow email. And we're doing this because we like talking to people and we like sharing our stories. And so we're always happy to talk to people in college who are making decisions about their careers and want to know what comes next. Please don't hesitate to reach out.
But yeah, I mean, I think this should be the end of the meeting. Again, I hope you guys have a great night and see you in the future.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Well, that was really good.
I learned a lot from that